Amna, a young journalist living in Denmark, was known for her fearless investigative reporting and her sharp intellect. She had built a reputation for uncovering complex crime networks that others found impenetrable. Being a Muslim woman in the world of Western journalism set her apart, but it was her unwavering dedication and sharp instincts that earned her respect among her peers. One of her most famous exposés involved a sophisticated money laundering scheme that used charities as a front. While many had tried and failed to connect the dots, Amna methodically pieced together financial records, obscure transactions, and hidden donors. Within days, she uncovered a vast network that linked seemingly innocent organizations to an underground criminal empire. Her reporting didn't just bring the culprits to justice, it also inspired regulatory changes to prevent such exploitation in the future. Another case involved a missing persons report that had been dismissed by local authorities as a domestic dispute. Amna sensed something more sinister. Through tireless interviews and data analysis, she traced the individual's last known movements and discovered a human trafficking ring operating under the radar. Her courage in going undercover and her ability to think several steps ahead allowed her to expose a group that had evaded law enforcement for years. The authorities lauded her efforts, and she received a national award for investigative journalism, the youngest journalist and the only Muslim woman to achieve that honor in Denmark's history. Amna's unique perspective and high IQ made her a formidable force in her field. She was not only respected for her talent, but also admired for the speed with which she solved cases that seemed unsolvable. Her name became synonymous with integrity and excellence in journalism. As Amna's reputation grew, so did the complexity of the cases she tackled, yet she always approached each one with the same meticulous care and relentless determination. Ramzan was about to start, and Amna had come out for some grocery shopping with Angelina. The two of them strolled through the aisles of a large grocery store, adding items to their cart as they went along. Angelina kept glancing at the shelves and commenting on the products, while Amna listened quietly, occasionally smiling at her remarks. In the midst of their conversation, Angelina casually mentioned, "Our church closes during Ramzan." Amna was taken aback. She paused and asked, "Really? Are Christians truly that considerate of Muslims?" Angelina smiled and patiently explained how her father always closed their church at the start of Ramzan so that the Muslim community could observe the month without worry or disturbance. This revelation surprised Amna. She had never heard of such a gesture before. Angelina, who had always seen her father as a strict, devout figure, now spoke with pride about his thoughtful practice. She went on to explain that their church only reopened after Eid, a deliberate effort to show solidarity with their Muslim neighbors. As Angelina shared these stories, she quietly placed a bottle of juice in Amna's cart. Amna noticed but didn't say anything. She simply thought to herself, wondering why Angelina's behavior seemed so unexpectedly supportive. This grocery trip turned out to be different from the usual errands. There was a peculiar mixture of light-hearted banter, surprising cultural sensitivity, and an undercurrent of doubt that lingered in the air. Ramzan had started, but Amna wasn't one to take a break from her work. Even while fasting, she carried on with her investigations, tirelessly pursuing the truth. Her latest project was a documentary that aimed to expose a politician's dark deeds. Every day she ventured out, meeting people, collecting evidence, and piecing together a narrative that no one else dared to tell. One day, as part of her research, Amna met the politician's secretary. On her way back, she happened to pass by a familiar church. It was Angelina's church, the one she had visited once before. Seeing it again triggered a flood of memories. She recalled the conversations she had with Angelina, the stories about the church closing during Ramzan, and all the little details that had seemed innocuous at the time. Now, standing there, her thoughts began to shift. Something about those past conversations nagged at her. Why would a Christian community go to such lengths to show solidarity with Muslims? Amna's intuition, her well-honed journalist's sixth sense, started sending warning signals. What if something was off, something she had missed earlier? As she stood staring at the church, Amna couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something that didn't quite add up. Her mind raced with questions, and though she didn't have the answers yet, she resolved to find out what lay beneath the surface. A couple of days later, Amna finally got the chance to speak with Angelina again. Their conversation was more tense than usual. Amna decided to be upfront, explaining that her intuition, her sixth sense, had been buzzing since their previous discussions about the church. She told Angelina that she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Angelina's response was immediate and defensive. She frowned, clearly upset. "Why would you even think something like that?" she asked, her tone sharper than Amna had ever heard. "Our community has done nothing but show kindness, and now you're accusing us of—" "What exactly?" Amna tried to explain, insisting that she wasn't accusing anyone directly, but that her instincts were rarely wrong. She felt compelled to dig deeper, to ensure nothing was being hidden under the guise of goodwill. But Angelina wasn't having it. The conversation quickly turned into an argument, with Angelina expressing how deeply insulted she felt by the insinuations. To her, Amna's doubts weren't just about the church. They were an attack on her own faith and integrity. Frustrated and hurt, Angelina walked away mid-discussion, refusing to engage further. Over the next few days, she ignored all of Amna's attempts to reach out. She didn't answer her calls, nor did she reply to her messages. Amna was left feeling conflicted. She respected Angelina, but she also couldn't ignore the gnawing doubts that her instincts had raised. In her frustration, Amna turned to her mother for advice. Sitting at the kitchen table, she recounted the entire situation. Her mother listened patiently and then said, "Amna, you've spent so much time investigating criminals that you've grown overly suspicious. Not everyone has an agenda. Maybe they truly were just trying to show goodwill." Despite her mother's calming words, Amna couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something she hadn't uncovered. After a week of silence, Angelina appeared at Amna's office one afternoon. Amna was surprised and relieved to see her, immediately apologizing for the confrontation that had driven a wedge between them. She admitted her words might have come off as accusatory, but Angelina, still visibly hurt, didn't let her off the hook so easily. "You think something's going on in the church, don't you?" Angelina asked bluntly. Amna hesitated but nodded. "I don't have solid evidence, but my instincts keep telling me something's off." "Fine," Angelina said, crossing her arms. "If that's how you feel, come with me to the church. I'll show you everything. Whatever you're worried about, whatever you think you're going to find, I'll prove you wrong." At first, Amna was hesitant. She didn't want to risk their fragile friendship, but Angelina was insistent. She seemed determined to clear her name and that of her church. Amna reluctantly agreed, but as they planned the visit, a small part of her couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered beneath the surface. It wasn't just the church that worried her. It was also Angelina's demeanor. The urgency, almost desperation in her friend's voice, made Amna question if there was more to this than Angelina was letting on. The two decided to meet the next morning. On the walk to the church, Angelina did her best to put Amna's mind at ease. "You'll see, it's a simple place, nothing sinister. We close during Ramzan out of respect. That's all there is to it." But her tone seemed slightly off, nervous rather than confident. Amna noticed her hands fidgeting, her pace quicker than usual. It was as though Angelina wanted to reach the church as fast as possible, as if the conversation would end once they arrived. Standing outside the church, Amna couldn't help but feel conflicted. She wanted to believe Angelina, to trust her friend's sincerity. But the journalist in her, the sharp instincts honed over years of chasing the truth, told her to stay vigilant. Something wasn't adding up, and Amna was determined to find out what it was. Despite her lingering doubts, Amna followed Angelina into the church. From the outside, it appeared no different from any other. Simple architecture, a humble bell tower, and a modest entrance. But as soon as Amna crossed the threshold, an uneasy feeling washed over her. Something about the space felt off, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Her mind began sending her red flags, and her senses seemed to heighten with every step she took. Inside, the church was quiet, dimly lit, and largely empty. The air carried an inexplicable heaviness. Angelina led Amna down the central aisle, pointing out features as if to put her at ease. "Here's the altar, and there's the choir loft," she explained casually. But her voice carried a slightly hurried tone, as though she wanted to move things along quickly. Amna listened, her gaze scanning every corner for something, anything out of the ordinary. The structure seemed normal, but that feeling in her gut wouldn't subside. After a brief tour of the main floor, Angelina gestured toward a small door at the back of the church. "That's just the basement," she said quickly. "We keep old furniture and supplies down there. Nothing worth seeing." Amna's eyes lingered on the door. "Can I take a look?" Angelina hesitated. "It's just storage. There's really no point." "I'd like to see it anyway," Amna insisted. Angelina's hand tightened on the door's handle. She smiled faintly, but her voice was strained. "It's not very clean. I'd rather not." Amna could sense the subtle tension in her friend's demeanor. It wasn't like Angelina to be so hesitant. "I just want a quick look," she said firmly. After a moment of visible reluctance, Angelina relented. She pushed open the door, but as she did, Amna noticed the slight tremble in her hand. Something about Angelina's nervousness seemed to confirm Amna's unease. Though she had no solid evidence, her instincts were screaming at her that whatever lay in the basement wasn't just a collection of dusty old furniture. With a deep breath, Amna stepped inside, prepared for what might come next. As Amna descended into the basement, a sharp, pungent smell hit her immediately. It was so strong she instinctively covered her nose and mouth. The light was dim and the room was shrouded in shadows. Her eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the space. There were old wooden crates piled up against one wall and a few pieces of battered furniture scattered about. The air felt thick, and her every step seemed to echo ominously. Angelina followed behind her, though she kept her distance. "This basement's been closed off for a long time," she said quickly. "That's probably why it smells so strong. Stale air, old materials." But Amna wasn't so sure. The smell didn't seem like it had been there for years. It felt fresh, as if something new had been brought in recently. Still, she didn't argue. Instead, she focused on her surroundings, carefully observing every detail. In one corner of the room, partially hidden by a tattered sheet, was a large, unfamiliar object. Amna approached it slowly, her heartbeat quickening. The shape under the cloth was oddly mechanical, and she could hear a faint hum coming from within. Her instincts screamed at her that this was something important, something more than just discarded junk. As she reached out to lift the sheet, Angelina's voice suddenly broke the silence. "Amna, wait!" she shouted. Amna turned sharply to see Angelina at the base of the stairs, clutching her arm in obvious pain. Blood dripped from a deep gash on her forearm. She had fallen, or perhaps cut herself on something sharp. Amna rushed over, momentarily abandoning the object she'd been examining. "What happened?" she asked, her voice edged with concern. "I tripped," Angelina said, her voice shaky. "It's nothing, just a scratch." But Amna knew it wasn't just a scratch. The wound was deep and bleeding heavily. The basement, already filled with an eerie tension, now felt even more charged. Amna's curiosity was battling her worry for Angelina. Something had happened here, and Amna wasn't going to leave until she understood what it was. Angelina's sudden cry of pain sent Amna into a state of panic. The sight of the deep cut on her arm overwhelmed her thoughts. Without hesitation, she helped Angelina out of the basement, supporting her as they made their way out of the church. The eerie atmosphere of the basement was momentarily replaced by the urgency to get medical help. As they hurried to the car, Angelina's tears flowed freely. She clutched her wounded arm, wincing with every step. Amna, though visibly shaken, kept her composure enough to drive. The entire journey to the hospital was tense. Angelina sobbed quietly, and Amna's mind raced with questions. What had caused the injury? Could it have been an accident, or was there something more to it? When they arrived at the emergency room, the nurses quickly took Angelina into a treatment area. Amna stayed behind in the waiting room, her mind replaying the events in the basement. She couldn't shake the memory of the strong smell, the faint hum of the machine, and the uneasiness that had filled the air. The cut on Angelina's arm had seemed almost too precise, as if it had been inflicted by something sharp and deliberate rather than a random accident. After what felt like an eternity, the nurse informed Amna that Angelina had received 6 stitches and would be okay. Still, Amna felt unsettled. The mystery of the basement, the odd tension in Angelina's behavior, and now the unexpected injury, everything seemed connected, though the pieces of the puzzle had yet to fully come together. Amna resolved to keep digging for the truth. But for now, her focus was on ensuring Angelina was safe. She helped her friend home, determined to find the answers soon. The next morning, Amna woke up to the sound of her mother's voice. "A parcel came for you," her mother said, placing the package on the table. Amna rubbed her eyes and walked over to see the medium-sized brown box sitting innocently before her. She didn't recall ordering anything, and no one had mentioned sending her a package. Curious, she opened it, her hands moving quickly, only to stop in stunned silence at what lay inside. Neatly arranged were stacks of documents, photographs, and files, everything she had been searching for. These were the very materials she'd been working tirelessly to collect on the corrupt politician she'd been investigating. Amna's heart raced. How was this possible? For 2 months she had been chasing elusive leads, carefully piecing together scattered bits of information, and now, out of nowhere, the entire case was laid out before her. She sat down on the floor, the open box in front of her, her mind spinning. Each file she pulled out confirmed that these were the missing pieces she'd desperately needed. Signed contracts, hidden bank transfers, witness statements, proof of the crimes she had been struggling to expose. But something felt off. As much as the contents seemed like a blessing, they also felt too convenient. Amna grabbed the parcel slip and examined it closely, hoping to find a sender's name or address. It was blank. No clue as to who had sent the box, how they had obtained these files, or why they had chosen to deliver them to her now. This realization sent a chill down her spine. Was this a genuine ally helping her, or a calculated move from someone with their own motives? When her mother walked into the room and saw the contents of the box, she assumed Amna's long hours of investigation had finally paid off. "This is good news," her mother said with a smile. "You've got everything you need now." But Amna wasn't so sure. "It's too perfect," she muttered. "I feel like someone's steering me, keeping me focused on this case so I won't notice what's really going on. Something's missing." Amna's joy was quickly overshadowed by doubt. She was grateful for the breakthrough, but the mysterious nature of the parcel left her on edge, and she resolved to uncover the truth behind it. As Ramzan entered its final days, an alarming trend began to emerge across Denmark. Muslim communities, already focused on their fasting and spiritual reflection, were suddenly struck by a series of unexpected deaths. Within a matter of days, the death toll climbed higher and higher, leaving families and communities in shock. The cause of these tragedies seemed strangely consistent. Almost every victim had suffered a fatal heart attack. It didn't take long for people to notice a chilling pattern. All of the deceased had been using the same brand of juice to break their fast at iftar. The connection seemed impossible at first. How could something as simple as a fruit drink be linked to such a horrific outcome? But the numbers were impossible to ignore. Families who had never faced any health issues were now dealing with loss, and it all pointed back to the juice on their tables. When authorities stepped in to investigate, their laboratory tests revealed a grim truth. The juice contained a toxic chemical, one that slowly attacked the heart's muscles. As Muslims broke their fast, the substance took hold, gradually weakening the heart until it could no longer function. The toxin's effect was both swift and devastating, creating what looked like natural heart attacks but was anything but. The discovery shocked the nation. This was no mere accident. It wasn't a faulty batch or a contaminated shipment. The toxic chemical had been deliberately introduced. With the cause now identified, the question shifted to something even more sinister. Who would target Muslims in such a calculated way during their holiest month? As suspicion mounted, the need for answers grew more urgent. The community, once united in faith and celebration, now faced a wave of fear and uncertainty. When investigators inspected the juice company's facilities, they found no evidence of wrongdoing. Every machine, every ingredient, and every batch seemed clean and above board. On paper, the company was innocent, but something still felt off. Amna's instincts told her that someone outside the company had manipulated the product. A third party must have interfered, altering the juice after it left the factory. That evening, Amna joined her family for iftar, her mind preoccupied with the disturbing pattern. She watched the news, which was now filled with reports of Muslim deaths linked to the juice. The anchor's voice grew louder as they described the rising death toll. Blame was being directed squarely at the juice company. As plates were passed around the table, Amna's thoughts churned. This couldn't be a random act. The deaths were too targeted, too systematic. Then, as she stared at the TV screen, something clicked. She excused herself, grabbed her phone, and began reviewing videos of the company's production line. In one clip, she noticed something peculiar, a faint mark on the machinery that didn't match the rest of the factory's setup. Amna froze. She had seen that mark before, though not at the juice plant. It had been on a machine she spotted in the church basement. Her heart sank. The puzzle pieces began to fall into place. Her intuition had been right all along. The strange basement, the defensive reactions, the nervous energy surrounding her investigations. It was all connected. This wasn't just a case of contaminated juice. It was something far more deliberate, and Amna now had a clear direction for uncovering the truth. Amna barely slept that night. Her mind raced as she reviewed every detail of the case, scribbling notes and pinning them to her bedroom wall. By the time the sun rose, the wall was completely covered, and she had formed a clear plan. She reached for her phone and called Angelina, but as expected, it went straight to voicemail. Determined not to waste any more time, she got dressed, gathered her documents, and set out. Her resolve hardened as she walked into the newsroom. She briefed her colleagues quickly, laying out her theory and the evidence she had compiled. With a determined look, she asked them to prepare for live coverage. Then she made the call to the local authorities. She knew the stakes were high. If she was wrong, her credibility as a journalist could be permanently damaged. But if she was right, lives were at stake. Amna led the police to the church, walking briskly through its doors with reporters trailing behind. As they reached the basement, tension filled the air. The authorities carefully surrounded the area before breaking open the door. Inside, they found exactly what Amna had predicted, a full-scale operation. Workers scrambled to shut down machines that were clearly producing the toxic juice. The room was packed with barrels of chemicals, stacks of empty bottles, and piles of packing materials. The journalists documented everything as the police arrested the individuals on site. Amna stayed back, watching silently as the scene unfolded. She felt a mix of relief and dread. The truth was finally out, but the sheer scale of the operation shook her. What she had uncovered was no small conspiracy. It was something far more calculated, something that would leave a lasting mark on the community. The moment the police stormed the basement, chaos erupted. Workers scrambled, shouting in confusion, and some tried to escape. Officers quickly detained them, putting an end to their operations. Among those arrested were individuals Amna had never seen before, hardened, calculating faces that made it clear this was no ordinary group. But the two people who caught Amna's breath were Angelina and the church's priest. Amna's heart sank as she watched Angelina, her friend, being led out in handcuffs. She wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, but the look on Angelina's face, a mixture of defiance and guilt, made her stop. The betrayal hit Amna hard. She had trusted Angelina, even doubted her own instincts for a time. Now, seeing her alongside the culprits, confirmed that she had been right all along. During the police interrogation, the full scale of the operation came to light. The group was revealed to be part of a covert organization with a singular goal: to target Denmark's Muslim community under the guise of goodwill. By operating out of a church, they deflected suspicion. Angelina had befriended Amna, not out of genuine connection, but to keep tabs on her investigations. It was her overconfidence and Amna's persistence that had brought their plan to a halt. Amna felt a deep sorrow for what could have been, but she knew this wasn't the end. She had uncovered a dangerous network, and though it hurt to see her friend among the perpetrators, the truth finally prevailed.